Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mangtas Nation. Today is a very special episode as it's our first show episode of the year. Yay! Now, before we start today's episode, we would like to thank all of our listeners that have been subscribing to our show. We will surely bring a lot more helpful and impactful content this year. Now, to start the year off with a blast, our guest for today is a content strategist, copywriter, podcaster, and the director of Simple Creative Marketing. He's known to help passionate and driven entrepreneurs communicate their worth with clarity and conviction. So without further ado, listeners, please help us welcome Anfernee Chansamooth.
Hello, welcome. Oh, and
Hey.
Thanks for inviting me to join you both.
Well, thank you, Anne. Well, we're so glad to have you here on our first show of the year. And to start off, Anne, I'm sure our listeners would love to hear a little bit more about yourself.
Well, I'll give you the abbreviated, summarized version of a long life. So essentially, I left my corporate job. I worked in corporate IT for a number of years. In 2008, that was a global IT company. Due to ending up in hospital because of burnout, and that resulted in a 5-hour brain surgery. That's when I made the decision to really look at what was going on with my life and my career. And I had the urge then to seek meaningful work and really to, develop skills that would be useful to empower people in some way. Okay, so now, right after that event, I ended up booking a one-way flight to Toronto, Canada, and spent, a good 12 months still working for that company. But then the recession hit in 2009, and I was made redundant. And then I was stuck in a situation where I'm living in Toronto. I've got some roommates. I don't have a job. I've got rent to pay and groceries, of course, all those good things. And I'm wondering what am I going to do, because I still had another 12 or 18 months on the visa, and I wanted to stick around. Like, I was enjoying my time over there. And it was actually one of my housemates who said, hey, you've been volunteer teaching on the weekends at the church, teaching salsa lessons. Why don't you do that out of our living room? And it sparked this idea in my mind to go and try and do that. So I found this website, which you may know. It's called meetup.com, which was a new site back then, and then signed up, created this group, which was Toronto Beginner Salsa. Within 2 weeks, I had 200 members, and then I put on my first pay what you can salsa lesson out of my living room. And that was my foray or journey into entrepreneurship. And at the same time I was doing that, I also was volunteering for a non-profit, learning all about social media and helping them to fulfill an event that they were doing. They were doing a conference 4 months away, and they needed someone to come in and help them essentially put bums on seats. And that's how I really got into social media and in that world and into the marketing world. So that's kind of a bit of a backstory to what I do. I'll fast forward to coming back to Australia a couple of years later. I started a Facebook advertising agency with a co-founder, and we ran that for 2 years. We parted ways. We had different directions and visions and where we wanted to go, and then that led to me actually getting a full-time role for one of Australia's largest co-working communities, and I was the head of marketing for that company for a couple of years before eventually leaving and then starting Simple Creative Marketing, which is the business I have now.
Phenomenal. I have so many questions, so many things I wanted to zoom into based on what you said. Let's start with the first thing, that burnout. I'm sure there'll be a lot of listeners on this call that can relate to this. Tell us a bit more about that, on what happened exactly, how it happened, and oh my God, 5 hours surgery. Tell us a bit more, and yeah. And then maybe as a follow-up, what are you doing now to ensure that doesn't happen? Being an entrepreneur, I mean, the pressure is probably even higher, right? Your self-imposed pressure usually.
Absolutely.
What are you doing today to make sure that, you prevent this from happening again?
Great questions, Walter. So I'll answer the first one, which was the burnout situation. Essentially, I was working for this corporation. We were doing, on average 50 to 60 hours a week. I was a global project manager doing global IT implementation projects. So there were, during that time, I was flying to India. I was in Singapore. I was in Malaysia. I was in different places at different times, and then trying to coordinate. We'll call them resources, but they're human beings, and really working to get these technical rollouts happening. And it was just a lot of stress. It was a lot of partying, I won't lie. But it was also, that was really the way that we hid from the stress, right? That's how we managed the stress was, hey, we'll work for 10 hours straight each day, and then we'll go and hit the bar and get drunk and do it again, right? And so that was kind of the culture. And then, you can only sustain that for so long. And by the end of that
at a
year,
certain
I was
age
completely
too.
burnt out. Yeah, I mean, that's late 20s, so I was 27, 28. But then, it was just like, okay, this isn't working. My body said, time to shut down. And literally, I woke up, I went to work the next day, had this massive, migraine type. I felt like a baseball bat someone was swinging a baseball bat at my head. And that was going on, for that whole morning, and I said to my colleague, "What does it feel like to have a migraine?" And she said, "Well, it's really painful, and if you've got that, go see a doctor." And I did, and the following 10 days later, I'm in a surgery, on a surgery table, 5-hour surgery, and then in hospital for 2 months. And now the second part of your question, Walter, was what am I doing now to kind of prevent that? So. What I've done is really to be more conscious about my time and really taking. So I'm currently, it's funny you ask this question now, but I'm actually going through a process of losing weight. That's my goal this year, is to get more healthier. I'm walking a lot more. The pandemic's actually forced me to, walk around my neighborhood with my wife. We do that after lunch, we do it after dinner, and that's become a beautiful routine for us. And I always have a morning walk. So when I wake up, before I get my coffee, Jackie, I will do my walk, and then I'll go grab my coffee. And then there's these little things, right? So I'm also doing meditation. I'm also, when I had a bike, I used to ride my bike a lot, and that was a good way to get into my body, but also relieve the stress. And also something that I've learned to do over the years is to actually say no to a lot of things. So when I get meeting requests and I get requests to go have coffee or Zoom calls or whatever it may be, I'm saying no to a lot of those now. And I've also brought on an assistant. I've got an assistant on my team. You've been having communication with Janine. She kind of is the gatekeeper, if you will, to my time. So she's the block. So everything has to go to her first, and then it comes to me.
Wow.
And what's really interesting is I've had exactly your role, and to a certain extent similar experiences, not the surgery, but I was running tech rollouts in APAC as a project manager. I think probably the most stressful job in the world. Mainly because it's not under your control. You're depending on tech that you don't own and control, and then rolling it out, and clients breathing down your neck. So we can relate to what you're saying exactly, and great that you're okay, right? And that you found
100%,
a way to prevent it from happening. And again, and I hope you'll be able to. But by this, by this broadcast, hopefully others will not go through what you have gone through. Another thing you touched upon, what I find very fascinating and relevant, right? Most startups fail because the co-founders break up, right? That's a known statistic, right? Maybe a little bit of insight on that. I mean, I think our listeners would be very interested to hear about that. And if you could go back in time, what would you do differently?
I think, that's a great observation, and it was my experience. We met at an event, and we felt that we clicked, and if I was to do it differently, I'd spend more time getting to know the partner or prospective partner, and really understand what their motivations were, where they were sort of, maybe if they had a 5-year goal or a 10-year plan for their life and their career, and really explore, maybe do a trial run, right? Let's do a trial for 3 months and see how we gel, how we work together, and then understand sort of our motivations. I'd also, big tip for anyone listening, I'd read Profit First, which is a great book that I didn't read until very recently. And one of the biggest issue for the reason why that business failed was because we didn't have adequate salary for both co-founders, right? So both partners. We were making money for the business, but we didn't have salaries, and we weren't paying ourselves. So that was a major issue. Everything is exacerbated or it gets worse when you have a cash flow issue, right? So when things are going good and cash flow is good, right, it's like, oh yeah, the party's, everything's fun, right? But when you're having these meetings and you're like, oh, what are we doing today, or what are we doing for fun? And it's like, we're making sales calls, right? Like that's our fun. Okay, so that's probably a good indicator that there's, you need to work on your business model a bit better, and you also need to understand what's motivating both parties. And for me, frankly, I'm not so motivated by the money. I'm motivated by impact. And I'm talking about social impact. I'm talking about making change in people's lives. I'm talking about going out and volunteering. And my number one, if you're familiar with the global goals, and I'm sure both of you are, there's, a range of goals that you can choose or resonate with. And for me, education is the number one. And so for me, everything I do revolves around education.
Wow. And when it comes to simple creative marketing, how do you connect that goal, that drive to bring education out as a message through simple creative marketing?
So being on this podcast is an example. Like I will go and do, teach. Like I love to teach. I do workshops. When pre-pandemic, I was traveling around the world giving talks at in co-working spaces, in wherever I can go and do them. I did a talk which had nothing to do with business when my wife and I went to Osaka in Japan. They wanted to learn about Australian culture, and so I went to this co-working space and taught them about Australia. Maybe I'm not the best example ambassador for that, but they had a lot of fun. I brought them some Australian Aussie beer and they loved it. So and some Tim Tams, and that was so for me. I've also, I think I mentioned, I've also, after I left Canada, I actually spent 2 years living in Laos, where I was born, and I actually volunteered at a school there, and worked with children, students from kindergarten age through to 8th grade. And whilst there, I actually launched an initiative called Design for Change, which is a global initiative, and we became the Lao. Our school was the Lao ambassador, and that involved 5 volunteers. On the weekends and after classes, I would actually meet with 4 volunteers from different schools, and then we would roll this program out and pitch it to other schools. And the whole program was centered around teaching children to believe in the words "I can," and really, and it was really focused on letting them identify issues they were having in their local communities and in their schools, and then helping them, giving them a framework to actually go and address those issues, right? And so that program rolled out to, I think, 9 schools by the time we completed, 200 plus kids, 30 plus teachers across all the schools, and then we actually had a documentary filmmaker film that as a documentary as well. So that was a really rewarding experience for me and the team. So that's the kind of work that I like to do. I hope that answers the question.
Phenomenal, and we should put that link as an extra to this recording, Jackie. I want to see that documentary, and maybe our listeners too, right? By the way, Laos, very close to my heart. I have my father and my half-sister live there right now, Vientiane, and
oh, wow.
I've been there, love the place. So yeah, and maybe just to shift gears a little bit on what you do today, right? Content marketing you mentioned, and specifically B2B, right? And maybe if we a question that's dear to my heart as well, being a marketplace for B2B outsourcing services and ourselves having marketing and content being critical to what we do, right? What makes content marketing different for B2B versus, for instance, B2C?
My immediate answer to that is B2B. B2C, you're speaking to direct to consumer, so therefore a lot of it is very quick interactions. A lot of it is either entertainment, right? So if you're thinking about TikTok or you're thinking about ads on Instagram, whatever it may be, a lot of the messaging is more let's catch them with fun and entertainment, and then let's push them to offering discounts, coupons, all these kind of things to move customers to a quick sale, right? B2B has, as you both would be aware, has longer sales cycles. Therefore, what you're really focused on is marketing that builds and establishes authority, credibility, trust, and then the goal is not to immediately sell. The goal is actually to build a relationship, right? So it's actually to meet the people who would be your prospective clients or customers. Typically you might end up jumping on a call, having a conversation. A lot of consultants or whatnot might do discovery calls, and then go through a journey of developing that relationship over time, and then moving to when it makes sense, to go towards a sale, and where it's been effective is where content is placed to help build that relationship up front, as opposed to content being used to immediately sell something. And that's where I see the main differences are between the two.
Wow. Yeah, very, very good takeaways. And especially, for us being in the B2B sector and for me being in marketing, if there are some just top tips for content marketing that you can give to B2B marketers, and also maybe some common errors that you see in B2B marketing that shouldn't be practiced based on your experience.
Sure, Jackie. So let's start with the challenges first, and then that will then naturally give us the sort of suggestions and tips to address those. In B2B, there's a few common mistakes or challenges that I see. The first one is, businesses not having a clear strategy as to how they're going to utilize content, or even just a clear marketing strategy. Like I can't tell you how many times I've spoken to, whether it's a director or a CEO, or the marketing head of marketing, whoever it is, in the business, and they typically come to us for content, and then when I say, well, what's your content strategy and what's your marketing strategy, they don't have an answer, right? And it's very hard then, then a common question I would ask is, what's your marketing budget? Again, we don't have a budget, and and that's a very hard. If that's your answer, there's a problem, because you don't really understand, the value of investing in certain types of marketing. Because if you're going to invest, say, $5,000 next month on a Facebook ad campaign, how do you know that that's going to actually provide adequate return for your business? And I'll give you an example when I worked with the co-working space. So we had a PR agency that we worked with. We invested, I think it was like $30,000 a year in them. And when I joined the team, a question I asked in one of our meetings was, how do we know that we're getting, at least $30,000 of value coming back from all that PR, right? And no one knew, and the PR agency didn't even know, because their metrics were based on reach, right? So all they cared about was, hey, how many eyeballs had seen the articles or the videos or whatever they were putting out for us, or for the company. But on the back end of that, the PR, as far as they're concerned, their job is done. Like, that's what we're paying them to do. That's what PR is, right? So we actually end up cutting that contract and saying, that's not a good investment of marketing dollars, because, we're better off placing, $10,000 on Facebook ads and being able to track the sales inquiries coming through those ads, and then, understanding the funnel and how that goes. So that's, not having a clear strategy and direction, major issue. Another one is focusing on the wrong types of content, right? So, a big piece of all of this I mentioned earlier, for B2B, we're talking about, we're in the business of really it's not about selling products and service. It's about building trust, right? It's building trust in what you do, building trust in your mission, building trust in what your team does, and you know, in your culture, and then also building trust in that you can deliver. So a lot of content that's out there, and you would have seen it, right? So there's I can't remember the statistics, but there's literally thousands, if not millions, of blog posts going up every single day. And so the landscape is very super hyper competitive right now. And so it's not enough to, you know, 10 years ago, you could do a 250 word article, put it on your website, and it would rank within a month. And you would keyword stuff the hell out of it, you know, and Google then introduced an algorithm change and said, no, we're going to punish anyone who does that. Or, you know, overnight, all these businesses went broke and lost all the rankings. So, you know, you have to understand the environment that you're playing in, and it is changing and it's evolving, right? So you both probably would have heard of the battle right now between Apple and Google. Apple and Facebook, right? So Apple are basically giving their users privacy rights and the ability to block ads, you know, being seen, and their data being given to Facebook. And so, right. So what does that mean for businesses? It means, well, hey, you invest a lot of money in ads, but guess what? Due to these changes, your audience might not be able to reach it, or might not be able to see those ads, right? So you have to understand that. Not building trust. Okay. Number 3, I'll say, is not paying attention to user experience. And one of the major issues I see in content marketing, particularly if you're, you know, hiring someone or you've got someone in your team to produce long form content or put stuff on your website, and your goal is to try and get that content to, you know, obviously rank highly on Google. Page 1 is ideal, and then that's going to bring organic traffic to you, and, you know, prospective buyers and whatnot. Your content. Right now, we're in a stage of evolution on the internet where brand and visuals matter. So, you know, it's if you see the content that's performing really well right now, and Google is actually ranking based on these factors, you know, it's actually looking at the user experience. How fast is the page loading, right? What are there any multimedia elements embedded in the content that actually increases page view time, right? You know, do you cater to accessibility, right? And consider, hey, like, you know, percentage of your audience might not be able to read or look at certain colors, or maybe they're blind and therefore they have to listen to audio. You know, that plays a function, because a lot of our audience is now accessing content through their phones and mobile devices. All right, so you have to really pay attention to those things as well, right? So it's not enough just to, you know, dump 2,000 words or 10,000 words on a page. Like, it has to actually visually engage them, and also we need to pay attention. There's been research done on how people read content. I'm talking about articles here, but you know, there are skimmers, the people who actually look at headlines and bullet points and they skim, and they just want, you know, this is the solution to my problem. And then you've got people who, once you grab them with the headline and the opening paragraph, they'll read in the index, they'll read the rest, right? So it just depends who that audience is and each individual. So you really want to consider that when you're creating your user experience. And so those are kind of the 3 major issues. And there's one more I'll add here, which is just assuming that one size fits all. And really not producing content for different audiences or segments of your audience, and then also not producing content for different parts of the buyer journey. Okay, and what I mean by that is, right, it's very different if you're speaking to someone who's ready to buy, or at that stage where they know the problem, they know who the vendors are, you know, they're evaluating your business against 3 or 4 other vendors, and now they're at a stage where, hey, I'm just ready to you know, I'm trying to find the right buyer, a right business to go with here. And so if your content doesn't speak to them at that stage, that's very different to content that's designed to attract visitors to your site, right? Very different. And even though, you know, the stats or whatever the research says, 95% of visitors will be not in buying, they'll be in research mode or just browsing mode. Educational content that informs is very different to content that's designed to convert, right? So they're kind of the four different areas that I'd be looking at.
And if content marketing, in your view, is all about building trust, right? And the way you explained it's more of a long-term play, right? So if you go and would pitch content marketing to, aggressive entrepreneurs and early stage businesses that want to sell and grow quick, who want to see quick results, right? How would you position content marketing, right? Like how would you convince a company that wants to sell and have quick ROI to put the right investment into content marketing? What would be your pitch, actually, out of interest?
I would actually evaluate with them what type of content is suitable for the objective, right? If you're trying to sell something quick, you're better off utilizing content. For example, ads will get faster reach and targeted reach to an audience faster than organic and trying to place content that drives traffic through Google search or SEO, right? So they're very different strategies. So for me, it's more around, if your goal is to sell faster, all right, let's look at we'd have to have a conversation around what your sales funnel actually looks like, all right? And what are the touch points that develop trust, right? And so, I've been working with a e-commerce accounting firm and then helping them they've gone through a rebrand last year or a couple of years ago, and now they actually pivoted because of the pandemic. They pivoted their core focus and their core audience, right? And so one thing we did was to actually shift all the messaging. We went through a whole process around values again and really understanding what the values and the mission and purpose of the business was, and then went through this was a good 12-month process of updating all their assets, and then doing all that in the background. But the key content or the key focus in terms of generating sales actually came from partnerships, actually came from very targeted conversations, connecting with influencers in specific communities, and then finding ways to add value to those prospective partners that would result in them then promoting the business, through workshops, through talks, through podcast episodes, through whatever it may be, email marketing channels, whatever it was, different campaigns that then led to sales. And that was, the approach was very different to what we had done 4 years prior, which was very focused on building long-term organic traffic. And now that site's probably hitting, I think it's like 20 to 25,000 visits a month on their site. But that was built 5 years ago, all right, with constant blog posts going out every month, every week, and doing guest blog posting and these kind of things. So does that answer your question, Walter? I think it's hard to give this is the only way to do it. You'd have to talk to the business and really understand the time pressure.
Yeah, 100%. And I guess the dilemma is always that balance, right? You want to move quick, you have that limited, resources and funding. What's the quickest ROI? And quite often the business, you need leadership that sees the value in long-term investment while meeting short-term needs, right? And there's an educational process, and I guess that's where it is coming from. And you answered the question, right? And I like how you're saying go through the sales funnel and see where your content marketing can improve the trust, right? And I like the way you position that. And if that's a good way. I like what you said, and it resonates for us.
Yeah, I'll give you another example. Like I worked with a consulting firm, and for them, they came to me and said, "Oh, should we do SEO and all these other things and create that type of content?" And I said, "Well, what's your objective and what's your sales process look like?" Right? And they said, "Well, we typically, approach a prospect, or they find us through content. We jump on a discovery call, we scope the project, we move on to what the consulting engagement will look like. It's a proposal stage, and then there's a sign off, and the client pays the money, and then they get going. Okay, well, if that's your sales cycle, how many, and then also the question here is how many clients you need to hit your revenue targets or your marketing targets per month. And, people think, to get to, $10,000 or $100,000 requires a lot, and really you don't, because it just depends on your price point and what you're selling, and you might only need 10 clients to get that, right? So if you only need 10 clients to get that, do you need to be putting out 200 articles, in 3 months? No. Do you need to be doing a podcast and interviewing everyone for the next year? No, right? Literally, let's go to LinkedIn, let's do a search for companies that fit the profile, okay, and let's go and outreach to them and start building connections with these people, right? And then let's do that, and also use email outreach to try and connect to them by email. If there's other ways to do this as well. But now what are the assets you need in terms of content? You'll probably need a proposal deck. You probably need a one-page flyer document which explains what your service is and who you serve. And I'd add probably a second page with a case study. So this is coming back to building trust and building credibility, right? Mm-hmm. Here's a story of how we helped a business just like yours produce this kind of outcome or this kind of result, right? Would you like to have a chat about that, right? And that's, in most cases will get you the phone call. And you don't need to be running all these ads and everything else. Yeah.
Fantastic and fabulous insights, and I feel as if we have to have like a second episode to cover a whole lot more of what you can share with us, which is such valuable information. But we might just do that maybe the second season. But yeah, unfortunately we'll surely keep in touch. And we unfortunately have to end this episode now, as we're running a bit low on time. But thank you so much, and for being our first guest for the year, and for all your valuable insight again and feedback. And if you can just quickly tell our listeners how they can reach you or find you before we end.
Absolutely. If you just want to head over to simplecreativemarketing.com, I've actually created some gifts that for your audience. So if they go to simplecreativemarketing.com/Mangtas, they can then access a few bonuses and resources that they could utilize free, no charge, and that's to carry on the conversation from what we shared today.
Fantastic. That's so fabulous. And thank you so much. It's very, very nice of you to do that. We've definitely, again, learned a lot from you. Let's keep in touch. And once again, this is Jacqueline de Monk.
And Wouter Del Barre.
And stay tuned for the next episode of Mangtas Nation.